Hi there and welcome to Tech Life, a channel where I aim to review everything from selfie sticks to laptops to IDEs for coding, video editing, software for producing thumbnails, essentially anything tech related. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you have anything that you think I should review, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to review that product. And this video is going to kick off a series of videos about learning to program in C#. These videos are going to be aimed at complete beginners, people who have never programmed before, or people who have a basic understanding of programming, maybe in a different language. So on that note, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is download and install Visual Studio. Visual Studio is an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. An IDE is an application that helps us to program more efficiently by combining capabilities such as editing code, compiling and building that code, testing the code that we've written, debugging the code, and then eventually packing and creating setup installations for that code. Visual Studio is Microsoft's preferred IDE for coding in .NET languages such as C#. So if you fire up your web browser, go to Google, and then I do a Google search for Visual Studio. Click the first link that Google brings back for us. And if we wait 2 seconds, this should take us to Visual Studio's homepage on the Microsoft website. Next we click on Downloads. And this page is where we can download Visual Studio. There are 3 different versions. The community edition is totally free. The professional version you will have to pay for, and then the enterprise edition you will have to pay for after the free trials. So you can download all 3 of them, but the professional and enterprise trials run out, I think, within 30 days, and then after that you will have to pay for those. And to be honest, the community edition is more than capable of doing what we're going to do in these tutorials. So go ahead and click the download. I'm not going to download this version of Visual Studio because I already have Visual Studio installed on my machine, and because I have that installation in place, I'm not able to install Visual Studio 2022 unless I uninstalled my previous edition, which I'm not going to because I've already paid for that, and it's the enterprise edition. So for yourselves, if you click on free download, this should start a download, and if you're running Windows, then that will go to your downloads folder. You simply have to go and find that exe file and then do a copy it to a different folder. I'd suggest maybe creating a folder called Visual Studio, copy it to that location, do a right click and run as admin, and then go through the process of doing the install. Follow the on-screen prompts, and then once you're ready, we'll fire up Visual Studio. The install process can sometimes take a good amount of time, so please be patient. You'll probably be prompted to reboot your box probably at least once during that installation process, and then you'll be prompted to provide a valid email address as well. So go ahead and do all of that. So hopefully you were able to install Visual Studio and are able to find Visual Studio in your start menu, or maybe even on your desktop. Visual Studio does give you a prompt to place a shortcut on your desktop, and if you've done that, then it's somewhat easier to fire up Visual Studio just by clicking the shortcut on the desktop. As you can see, I've already fired up Visual Studio, and for our very first project we're going to create something called a console application. And a console in Windows is just the command command window that we associate with the CMD command, and the application that we're going to create, or the program that we're going to write, is going to run within this command window. Okay, so from the file menu, if we select new and then new project, here we can see various different Visual Studio projects that we can create. Everything from a Windows Form application to Azure's mobile services or WCF service applications. The one we are interested in, so if you scroll back up, we are interested in the console application, so we select console, and then in the name text box we can give this console application a name. So I am going to call this our first app. So that's an original name, our first app. We click OK, and this should create a skeleton application for us. So Visual Studio creates a skeleton of a console app. I should have pointed this out while I was naming this app. I use something called Camel Case. The name of the app that we just created is our first app, and we can see that name over here. And if you see, the first character that I typed was an uppercase and then lowercase, and then our is considered to be one word, and then first is a different word. So I started that with an uppercase, and then the rest of the word was lowercase, and then the next word within this naming of the app was app, so I started that word with an uppercase as well. So commonly this is known as camel case, and even though Microsoft and Visual Studio do not enforce this, it's wise to use this type of naming convention. And as we go through this programming series, I'll point out other naming conventions that we use. Let's take a quick tour of the Visual Studio IDE. On the left here we have Server Explorer, so this allows us to see any servers that we might have connected to. Also there's a tab next to the server tab, and this displays any additional tools that we might be using. Dead center in the middle over here, this is our main working environment. This is where we'll write our code and edit our code. On the right hand side over here we've got our Solution Explorer, and this is where we can see any programs that we've added, any references that we might be adding, properties that we've imported in or we are creating. So all of that is displayed in this window on the right hand side. Team Explorer, this is used when we use things like TFS, but we're not going to worry about that. This allows us to work in teams of developers where you can check in code and check out code, but as I say, this is not something that we're going to cover in these beginner tutorials. At the bottom below Solution Explorer, this window is the properties window, so any files that we have created in the solution, the properties of those files will be displayed over here in the bottom right hand corner. And then to the left of that we have some output screens, so any output from our programs can be seen in these windows. We also have things like a task list, an errors list, and a package manager console as well. The one that is most useful for us is the error list and also the output. We'll talk more about these windows as we go through these tutorials. Coming back to the solution window, we can see that Visual Studio has created a number of different files. So let's have a quick look at these. Here right at the top we've got the solution, and this is simply a container. A solution can contain one or more projects. So the project that we created was our first app, and this project is contained within the solution. As I say, we can create one or more projects within a solution, and it's advisable to create related projects. So if it's logically related to this solution, then create it within this solution. If it's not logically related, then go ahead and create a separate solution. Again, the project is also a container, so if we drill into the project, we can see that that also contains things like properties, references, a configuration file, and also a .cs file. .cs files are class files, and it's in this case when you create a brand new project, Visual Studio creates a program.cs file, and this is what we can see in the window over here. So this is the program.cs file. And so as mentioned, program.cs is a class that Visual Studio creates for us. More often than not, we will go ahead and delete this, and we'll create a class which we can give a more meaningful name to. But before I go ahead and delete this class, let's take a quick look at the code that Visual Studio has created for us. So at the start of the code, we have these using statements. These are actually called directives, and these are using directives. The using directive is used in order to import types from namespaces, and it's also used to create aliases to types. I'll explain the using directive in more detail in later tutorials, but for now all you need to know is that these directives do actually help our program to run correctly. Below the using directives, we have a keyword called namespace. In this case, the namespace our first app. The namespace keyword is used to declare a scope that contains a set of related objects. We can use the namespace to organize different code elements and to create globally unique types. And again, we'll go into more detail regarding namespaces as these tutorials progress. Below the namespace, we have a definition for a class, so class program, and again, as mentioned, Visual Studio created this by default. And then below that, we have a method called main, and the main method in C# is the starting point of an application or a program. So all C# programs, also C# applications, will have a main method, and that is the starting point of any application. So let's quickly create our first C# app. First of all, we are going to delete this program .cs, this class. So in order to do that, we do right click and delete, and do OK to that. On our project container, we're going to do a right click, and we're going to come down to add, and what we're going to do first is add a new folder. We can name that folder, and we'll just call it something simple, my first app. Let me call it my first console app, and we hit return. And we can also do a right click on this folder, and now what we're looking to do is we're going to add a class. So if we do add, and then because it's going to be a new item, we click on new item, and at the top we can see here it's already selected, but if it wasn't, we could just click class, and in the text box down here we can name our class. we'll give this a meaningful name, my first app, and we do add. So this, what we've done here, the reason we've done this is because when we create a new application, Visual Studio just creates a generic method in which a generic class called program in which the method main is contained. What we need to do is to obviously create our own class which has a meaningful name, and then we're gonna place the main method within this class. So this class is been given a meaningful name, a relevant name, my first app, and within here we're going to create this main method, and we start the main method by defining it as static, and it's going to return nothing, so it's void. And then main is spelled with a capital M, and we have opening and closing braces, and within this method we also have these curly braces which define the start and end of our main method. Within this main method we're going to do something really simple. We're just looking to display something on our screen, so we can do that by using the keyword console, and I need to spell it correctly, console, and then the console class has a method called write, and we open our braces, and within the braces we are going to insert inverted commas, so a pair of those, and then within these we can place a text that we wish to display on the screen, and then it's going to be something really simple and straightforward. So this is my first C# console. I've lost focus on that. Let's go back on there. Console app, and we end this line by putting a semicolon at the end of it, otherwise C# will complain. Just a few points to note on this first line of code that we've written. C# is type sensitive, so we have to ensure that we not only spell these names correctly, but we also have to bear in mind that we need to use the right case, and more often than not C# lines of code do end in this semicolon, but not always. So for instance, if we have a look at this declaration of a method, declarations and class declarations are not ended with the semicolon, but code within those containers tend to be ended with this semicolon. So that's the first line of code. The second line of code I'm going to place in a second, because I want to show you something. Let's see if this compiles. So we go to build and we do build solution. Okay, had there been any errors, we would have seen those in this errors window. And in order to run this, let me show you the output. So here it said we've attempted to build one project, and so 1 has succeeded and 0 has failed. So we'll look at these as we go through these series of tutorials, but it's really useful to get very familiar with these windows, because there's a lot of feedback that Visual Studio gives to us, and actually that feedback more often than not is extremely useful. So we do tend to look at these windows quite often. So we've got success here. Now in order to run this small piece of code, we can either click the start button up here, or we can push the F5 key, and let's go ahead and click the start button, and we didn't see anything, because what happened there was when we click the start button, the compiler looks at this piece of code, displays it quickly, and then ends the program. First of all, it ends the main method, and then it ends the class, and then it closes everything down. And it happened so quickly we're not able to see it. So in order to fix this slight quirk, what we can do is add another piece of code just below this. Oh, actually, before I show you that, another way to fix this issue, if we hold down the control key and we hit the F5 key, so instead of clicking the start button, we can also run a program by clicking F5. So if we hold the control key and the F5 key, then the output is displayed and paused until we hit another key on our keyboard. So here it's saying this is my first C# console app, and that's the code that we inserted into the quotes, and the code after that, the text after that is press any key to continue, and that's a direct result of us using the control and the F5. Had we just pushed the F5 by itself, it would have done exactly the same thing as the start. It would have run the code quickly, we wouldn't have seen anything, and it would have stopped running the code. So let's hit any key, and the piece of code that would help us in this scenario is as follows. So again, it's a console, and another pointer here. So quite often when we start typing, so I type in CON, and we can see console displayed, and if I hit the tab key, that will actually insert the rest of the word, and then if I hit the full stop, and then it's kind of suggests what we might need, and in this case it's right. So again, if I highlight right and hit tab, it saves me having to type in the rest of the word. And in this case I made a slight mistake. I don't want to write, I actually want, so if I hit that full stop key again, I actually want a read. So if I start typing in read, it goes and selects the read, and again if I tab, it enters the rest of the word, and then I finish off that by the opening and closing braces, again not forgetting the semicolon at the end of that line. And so we can build this by clicking build and rebuild solution, and this is our output window. Again, rebuild all, 1 succeeded, 0 failed, which is always good news. And then if we go and click the start button, it actually displays our message, and the console window is not terminated until we hit another key on our keyboard. So let's go ahead and do that, and now the program finishes. Congratulations, you have officially created your first C# app. Next, we're going to take a quick look at variables. What is a variable? A variable is a named memory address that can hold a value. The value held in the variable can and often does change, hence the name variable. Again, we'll take a deeper dive into variables in upcoming videos, because there's two different flavors of variables in terms of where they store the value. So again, we're not going to delve too deeply at this moment in time, but as the series progresses, we can look at variables more closely. For now, we're going to create a variable called name. So I'm going to create this variable within the method, within the main method, sorry. And we have to create it just after the opening brace. So let's create the variable here, and when we create variables we have to define the type of variable it's going to be, and again we're going to look at types in the second video, but for now I'm going to just call this I'm going to define the type as string, and the name of the variable is going to be called name, and then I'm going to assign a value to this variable, and that value is going to be TechLife, and again I like TechLife. And in order to finish off this piece of this line of code, we're going to also enter a semicolon. We can see a little squiggly line underneath our named variable, and the reason Visual Studio is highlighting that, it's basically saying that we've actually declared a variable but we've not actually used it, and that's true, but we'll fix that in a second. So let's go ahead and use this variable. I'm gonna use this variable just here. At the moment our output is saying this is my first C# console app. I want it to say this is TechLife's first C# app. So I'm gonna delete the word my, and I'm gonna put in the inverted commas just after the is word, and I'll leave a space as well. And in this part of the code I'm going to place a plus sign, and now we're going to type in the name of the variable, which is name, and then we're going to place another plus sign. What we're doing here is essentially we've broken this one string down into three parts. The first two words is one chunk of a string, and then we're going to concatenate the value of the variable name to this first part, and then we're going to concatenate this last part of the string to the value of this variable. So that's why we have to place the plus sign. So we're saying essentially add the value of the name variable to these two parts, these two strings. So in order to make this a string, we have to place an inverted commas over here, and we're going to leave a space there as well. So this is going to read, this is space TechLife's space first C# console app. Okay, let's see that in action. I'm going to obviously hit F5 to build and run that. And there we have, this is TechLife's first C# console app. Excellent. Okay, so let's build on this. At the moment this is a hard-coded value, so the name variable is actually containing a value that is hard-coded, so TechLife is hard-coded to this variable. What if we wanted our user to be able to type a name, and then for that value to be entered into the string? Let's take a quick look at how we would go about doing that. Firstly, we would prompt the user, tell the user that we want them to enter a name or a string, and in order to prompt that user we'd display a message on the screen, and we know how to do that already. So we use console.write, and we're gonna put in quotes, please enter your name, and we mustn't forget the semicolon. Okay, so the user knows that they have to do something, and next what we will do is we will read the value that's been entered by the user, and we can do that by using the console.read. We're going to use console dot, and we're going to use console.readline. So now the program will wait until the user has typed something in and then hit the return key, and whatever the user types in, the value of that string will be saved into this string variable, and then the rest of the code remains the same. So let me just clean this up a little bit. And again, we can press F5 to compile and run this. Okay, so the console is saying, please enter your name, and I'm going to type in TechLive, and I'm going to hit return. This is TechLive's first C# console app, so that's worked. We can code this up slightly differently. I just wanted to show you this. Some people actually prefer using this way of doing things, but there's actually a slightly cleaner way to do things. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to put these curly brackets with a 0 in there, and then I'm going to go to the end of this line and leave a slight space. I'm going to place a comma, and now I'm going to insert the name variable just at the end of this line. So again, this is going to do exactly the same as the previous code, but the only difference being that we're not using the plus sign in order to concatenate explicitly, but this method of doing things is the name variable value will get inserted into this placeholder in the exact same place that it was inserted before. C#, like many other languages, is 0 based, so things like arrays and stuff, they always start at 0 and they go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we have one variable like we've got here, we place a 0 here. If we had another variable, we would add that second variable to the end of this line, and we would place these curly braces and place a 1 in there, not an A, a 1. And so essentially this would be the first variable and this would be the second variable, but because C# is 0 based, we start at 0. So let's see this piece of code in action. Again, F5 to compile and run. Again, it's prompting us, please enter your name. It's still TechLive. Hit return. This is TechLive's first C# console app. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up now. This was part 1. I'm hoping to do a series of these C# beginners tutorial. In this one, a quick summary, what we did was we downloaded and installed Visual Studio Community Edition. We created a small console app. Console apps are apps which do not have Windows forms. They are displayed in essentially the command window. We looked at one type of variable, the string variable, and we read input from our console and we output to that console as well. I showed you how to concatenate strings to form a meaningful output, and I showed you a couple of different ways to do that. Okay, so if hopefully you found this video useful and educational. If so, please do consider subscribing. Please also hit that like button, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2. Thank you so much for watching.